Ever wondered how a Saudi king transformed the global oil game? Let's dive into the story of Faisal bin Abdulaziz Al Saud.
Hey, I'm Garrett, feeling intrigued and ready to explore this one. There's a lot to unpack, and I'm down for that.
I'm Leah, excited and curious. Welcome to Laid Back Learning with Leah and Garrett.
All right, let's set the stage for this one. Our focus today is Faisal bin Abdulaziz Al Saud.
Picture this, a statesman who helped define Saudi Arabia's modern state and also changed the way the world thinks about oil and power. That's Faisal, full stop.
Quick story. I was reading about the 1973 oil embargo the other night, and it just grabbed me. An oil embargo is when a country stops selling oil to specific nations to make a political point. Saudi Arabia did that under Faisal, and prices quadrupled worldwide. I remember thinking, wow, one leader's decision in Riyadh puts serious pressure on Washington and Europe. That kind of leverage is wild, right?
So let's ground it. Faisal bin Abdulaziz was born in 1906 in Riyadh. He became king of Saudi Arabia in 1964 and ruled until 1975 when he was assassinated. Before that, he was foreign minister from 1930 almost continuously to his death, and prime minister for most of 1954 through 1975. That's decades of shaping policy at home and abroad.
And his big picture impact: modernization of the state, tighter administration, new institutions, and then globally, assertive oil diplomacy. He helped create or empower bodies like the Ministry of Justice in 1970 and championed planning and development. At the same time, he used Saudi oil as strategic leverage, which we'll get to.
Okay, here's where we begin the deeper dive. Faisal's family background really mattered. His mother, Tarfa bint Abdullah al-Sheikh, came from the al-Sheikh family, descendants of Muhammad bin Abdul Wahhab. That's the religious lineage tied to the kingdom's clerical leadership. Even though his mother died when he was an infant, that connection gave him built-in credibility with religious conservatives.
Under his maternal grandfather, Abdullah bin Abdulatif al-Sheikh, he studied the Quran and Islamic law. By about age 9, he had serious religious literacy. That foundation showed up later. He could frame policy in Islamic terms while pushing reform, like he spoke 2 languages fluently: faith and statecraft.
He also grew up with a culture of austerity. People describe him as valuing courage and simplicity. That contrasted a lot with perceptions of royal extravagance under his half-brother King Saud. It helped Faisal when he later argued for fiscal discipline. People believed he meant it.
Early on, he got thrown into diplomacy. In 1919, as a teenager, he went to Britain and France as an envoy after his older brother Turkey died. That was the first time a Saudi royal did formal visits there. Imagine being a teen watching European politics up close for 5 months. Not gonna lie, that kind of exposure sets a trajectory.
He wasn't just a diplomat, he was a commander. In 1922, he led thousands of fighters to consolidate Asir in the south. Then in 1926, he became viceroy of the Hejaz, the region with Mecca and Medina. He consulted local leaders and presided over a consultative assembly, helping knit that cosmopolitan region into the new state.
By 1932, he was already central. He visited Turkey to meet Ataturk, visited Iran and Poland, and then in September 1932, he read out the decree in Mecca proclaiming the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. That same early era included a 1934 campaign in the Saudi-Yemeni War under his command. So diplomacy and military credibility together.
Fast forward, in 1943 he visited the United States with his half-brother Khalid at Franklin Roosevelt's invitation. Early ties in what would become a long strategic relationship. Then in 1953, King Abdulaziz died, Saud became king, and Faisal was named crown prince. By 1954, he was prime minister, taking on day-to-day governance.
There was a rough power struggle with King Saud in the late 1950s and early 1960s. In 1964, the Grand Mufti issued a fatwa, which is a legal opinion in Islamic law, supporting Saud's abdication. Faisal became regent in March and king in November 1964 with family support. That transition is a masterclass in using religious legitimacy and family consensus to stabilize the state.
Now for the big policies. In 1962, as crown prince, he abolished slavery in Saudi Arabia. Reports say around 1,682 people were freed, with government compensation paid. That brought the kingdom into line with international norms and matched his broader reform program.
Same year, 1962, he announced the 10-point program, a roadmap for governance and development. It included things like judicial independence, a Supreme Judicial Council, creation of a Ministry of Justice, social welfare with free health care and education, customs exemptions on staples, and yes, final abolition of slavery. It's a blueprint for a modern administrative state.
Also in 1962, he founded the Muslim World League. That's a Saudi-based international Islamic organization for outreach and coordination. It was part of a larger strategy called Pan-Islamism, which means building unity and cooperation among Muslim-majority countries. That countered the secular Pan-Arab nationalism of the era.
He used Islam in foreign policy while staying close to the United States. And on the home front, he pushed socially sensitive reforms. Girls' education had begun with Dar al-Hanan in 1956 under his wife Ifat's patronage, and the General Presidency for Girls' Education was set up in 1960. He defended those moves in Islamic terms, persuasive if you've got the religious literacy he had.
Then in 1965, he introduced television. The first station began broadcasts that year. Despite its promise, there was a violent backlash. A nephew attacked the TV headquarters and was killed by security. Faisal held the line, arguing that responsible media could serve society and faith. That incident would echo later in his story.
Following that controversy, in 1967, he publicly said our Constitution is the Quran. That framed modernization without a Western-style written constitution. Around the same period, he elevated administrative capacity. He even created the post of second prime minister, appointing Prince Fahd, and kept pushing institutional reforms.
Regionally, he faced the Yemen crisis. In 1965, he and Egypt's President Gamal Abdel Nasser signed the Jeddah Agreement Principles for De-Escalation. And in 1969, after an arson attack at Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem, he convened a summit in Rabat. That created the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, or OIC, which is a bloc of Muslim-majority states coordinating on political and social issues.
He was also staunchly anti-communist. He declined ties with the Soviet bloc, and in 1971 he even worked with Egypt's Grand Imam of Al-Azhar on combating communism. It's a good example of religious institutions being mobilized to counter an ideology he saw as incompatible with Islam.
And then the headline moment, 1973. During the Arab-Israeli War, he led an oil embargo targeting Western backers of Israel. An embargo, again, is a halt of exports to specific countries. The move sent oil prices soaring and forced a global rethink of energy security. That's where his pan-Islamism and oil strategy interlocked on the world stage.
At the same time, he was quietly shifting oil economics at home. He reviewed Aramco profit sharing and steered more control and benefits towards state entities, including Petromin, the General Petroleum and Mineral Organization. That groundwork later enabled much stronger national control of hydrocarbons and downstream industries like petrochemicals.
Let's talk domestic modernization. He set up the administrative region system to clarify governance across the whole country. In 1970, he established the Ministry of Justice, professionalizing the judiciary. That was part of making courts and legal processes more uniform and reliable.
Education scaled fast. He pushed curriculum reform, free textbooks, financial aid for low-income students, and even told princes to educate their kids inside the kingdom. Why would that matter? Because it signals confidence in national institutions. If leaders' families use the same schools, demand for quality rises and reforms stick.
He also backed scholarships abroad to build technical skills. People trained in oil, aviation, and public administration came back to staff new ministries and companies. In healthcare, spending climbed. By 1973, public health and social affairs reached about 591 million reals and roughly 3.4% of the budget, boosting doctors, clinics, and hospital beds across the country.
Infrastructure was a huge push. Roads, including farm roads, expanded. Airports got upgrades. Saudi Arabian Airlines moved into the jet age, and a civil aviation training institute opened in Jeddah. Ports grew too. Jeddah Islamic port expanded and new ports were built in Yanbu and Jazan. That helped trade and the Hajj flow.
Agriculture saw serious attention. Water exploration, fighting desertification, boosting livestock and fisheries, and improving date production. The Jizan Dam came in 1970. The Agricultural Bank offered long-term, interest-free loans to farmers and fishermen for equipment. That meant people could modernize without debt spirals.
Defense and security were upgraded. He founded the King Faisal Air Academy in 1970 after announcing it in 1967, and procured English Electric Lightning fighter jets in 1965, with deliveries starting in 1968. He established new military cities in the south and northwest. On internal security, he cracked down hard on a suspected Nasserist coup plot in 1969 to keep stability during a wave of regional coups.
Religiously, it's a careful balancing act. He narrowed direct clerical control over executive decisions, but relied on senior scholars for big moments like that 1964 abdication fatwa. He included non-Wahhabi Hijazis in government, consulted Sufi scholars such as Al-Sayyid Alawi al-Maliki of Mecca, and even welcomed the West African Tijani scholar Ibrahim Niasse to the Muslim World League. The message was, all Muslims are brothers.
He also set limits. For example, he removed Sheikh Abdulaziz bin Baz from his post as rector of the Medina Theology College after bin Baz criticized royal corruption. Bin Baz later became the Grand Mufti, the top jurist, but that earlier move signaled that clerical power wouldn't overrule state policy. Some students from that era, like Juhayman al-Otaibi, later turned radical, a reminder of how sensitive that space was.
Even in the holy cities, he balanced modern capacity with heritage. The Grand Mosque in Mecca saw its first massive expansion in about 1,000 years, with the Saudi bin Laden group leading much of it. After a 1967 architects' conference leaned toward demolition of Ottoman-era features, Faisal pushed for preserving significant structures while adding capacity, including 2 new wings that began in 1969.
On symbolism, in 1973, he formally standardized the Saudi flag that had been in use since 1902. That seems small, but it was part of consolidating national identity as new institutions matured. Around the same period, he ordered Mirage 5 jets from France in 1972. Then in 1974, he donated those newly delivered planes to Egypt, reinforcing post-1973 Arab solidarity over domestic inventory needs. That's pretty cool, right?
Then the end came suddenly. In March 1975, he was assassinated by his nephew, Faisal bin Musaid. He was succeeded by his half-brother Khalid. The shock waves were huge. He'd become a respected figure in the Arab and Muslim worlds for modernization, stewardship of Mecca and Medina, and his oil diplomacy.
So here's the lingering question. Why was he killed? The widely cited theory links it to that 1965 TV headquarters attack. The assassin's brother died in that clash with security. The idea is there was a family grievance tied to conservative outrage over television. But is that the full story?
I lean toward that theory. It's specific, it lines up with the timeline, and the family link is hard to ignore. You had a new medium, television, which some conservatives saw as morally dangerous. A relative is killed at the station. A decade later, the king is shot. That's a thread that makes emotional sense, even if, legally, the motive was never nailed down publicly.
Totally get that, but I kind of wonder if broader politics added fuel. Think of the 1973 oil embargo, the security crackdowns in 1969, and the shifts in religious authority. Lots of high-stakes moves. Could there have been a mix of personal grievance plus the political climate of rapid change and tension? Not a conspiracy necessarily, just a combustible context that shaped one person's decision?
That's fair. Context matters. Still, the clearest through line is the family angle, and courts at the time didn't air out other theories. We see similar ambiguity with other episodes like the alleged 1969 Nasserist coup plot arrests. Some say there was even an American intelligence tip, but the details were never fully disclosed. Sometimes what we can document publicly just ends up thinner than we'd like.
And debate pops up around 1962 abolition too. Some argue U.S. pressure from President John F. Kennedy was decisive. Others credit Faisal's internal reform drive and religious legal path. The timing of a secret 1962 meeting with JFK makes U.S. influence plausible, but how much weight it carried is still debated. It all shows how complex cross-pressures were in that moment.
Real talk, with the assassination, the official story courts recognized still leaves motive unsettled historically. The 1965 TV incident gives us a human motive we can feel: grief and anger. Whether that was the only driver or just the spark in a tense atmosphere, that's the part we can't fully lock down.
Switching gears a little, it's kind of surprising there isn't a big mainstream film on Faisal. If someone did it, I'd watch a tight political thriller that follows the 1973 oil embargo, build up the pressure, intercut Riyadh, Washington, and European capitals, and end on the geopolitical pivot. Or a character drama that balances the mosque expansions, girls' education, and the TV controversy. That's got layers.
I'd love a series that threads his early 1919 Europe trip with the 1969 Rabat summit founding the OIC. A before and after of how he learned to use soft power, which is influence through culture, diplomacy, and ideas rather than force. That would be gripping and, actually educational.
Counterfactual time. What if King Abdulaziz had made Faisal crown prince instead of Saud back in the day? I think you'd see earlier fiscal discipline. That austerity streak could have avoided the late 1950s budget crisis and maybe fast-tracked institutional reforms like the Ministry of Justice and administrative regions.
Right, and if reforms landed earlier, education might have scaled faster. Girls' schooling could have expanded in a more settled environment, with less whiplash from political infighting. Also, Faisal's approach to oil governance, like revisiting Aramco profit sharing, might have come sooner. That could have reshaped development funding in the 1960s, not just the 1970s.
Foreign policy could shift too. Earlier pan-Islamic outreach might have dulled some of Nasser's pan-Arab momentum by the early 1960s. Maybe the Yemen conflict de-escalates earlier if Faisal's in full control. Fewer resources burned, less regional spillover. That's a curveball, but plausible.
Although, keeping it real, early power also means early pushback. If you curb clerical authority or expand media too fast, you could get stronger backlash. One reason Faisal succeeded was timing. He paired reforms with careful religious framing. If the clock moves, the coalition might not hold the same way.
Yeah, that checks out. Still, I think the median outcome is accelerated modernization and tighter budgets in the late 1950s and early 1960s. Maybe the 1973 oil moment still happens, but with an even more prepared state apparatus ready to channel revenues into industry, health, and education earlier, that would compound gains over time.
All right, that ties it up nicely. From a Quran-schooled prince to a global oil strategist, Faisal's story is a lot to sit with.
So there we have it. Thanks for hanging with us. Stay curious, and we'll catch you next time.